Hi, I'm Dwayne Brown. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, the partial government shutdown continues and a deadline on the debt ceiling is just 10 days away. The latest on the stalemate in Washington.
I'm Peggy Pico. Also ahead, Nathan Fletcher joins us for an in-depth interview in our series with San Diego's top mayoral candidates. Then, the Supreme Court began its new term today. Our analysis of some hot topic issues before the justices and what they could mean in San Diego.
Also tonight, how some folks are building with trash to help mend the environment along the border. And starting tomorrow, $100 bills will look a little different. We'll tell you about the bill's new defenses against counterfeiting. KPBS Evening Edition starts now. Hi, good evening. Thanks for joining us. The partial government shutdown in its second week with no end in sight and a deadline to raise the federal debt ceiling in 10 days. We have the latest from Jerry Bodlander of the Associated Press.
A driving rainstorm, the president headed to FEMA to underscore how the agency, with more than 85% of its workers furloughed, still has dealt with weather emergencies around the country. He noted some workers were brought back to deal with Tropical Storm Karen before it dissipated, and will now again be furloughed.
That's no way of doing business. That, by the way, just speaks to the day-to-day emergencies that may come up, and that is FEMA's job to respond to.
The president then dared House Speaker John Boehner to hold a vote on a spending bill with no attachments that would get all workers back on the job.
If Republicans and Speaker Boehner are saying there are not enough votes, then they should prove it. Let the bill go to the floor and let's see what happens. Just vote.
Democrats believe enough Republicans would join with them to approve such a measure. The Speaker didn't mention a possible vote during a brief appearance on the House floor, again reiterating the need for the president to sit down and talk with Republicans.
The president's refusal to negotiate is hurting our economy and putting our country at risk.
And with the stock market jittery, the White House signaled a willingness to accept a short-term extension of the nation's borrowing authority to avoid a default.
How they do that is up to them, and how often they want to vote on it is up to them.
Meanwhile, hundreds of thousands of civilian Pentagon workers are back at work, though they and federal workers still off the job aren't being paid. Jerry Bodlander, Associated Press, at the White House.
A wildfire at Camp Pendleton is expected to be fully contained tomorrow. More than 300 people were forced from base housing on Saturday. Along with dozens of patients at the Naval Hospital, they were all able to return to the base in Oceanside on Sunday. No one was hurt, but some buildings were damaged. The cause of the fire is under investigation. One of the candidates for San Diego mayor has dropped out of the race. Bruce Coons is throwing his support behind Councilman David Alvarez. Coons is best known as executive director of the Save Our Heritage organization. They successfully fought a plan to build a new bridge and underground parking at Balboa Park. Tonight, we continue our series of in-depth interviews with San Diego's top mayoral candidates. Here's Peggy Pico with former state assemblyman Nathan Fletcher.
Of the 10 remaining mayoral candidates, 4 have above 10% voter support, according to a recent poll by our media partner 10 News, including my guest, Nathan Fletcher. Nathan, welcome.
Hey, good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Here we are again.
Here we are again. And a lot has changed since you ran for mayor of San Diego back in 2012. You left the Republican Party, you became an independent, and now you're a Democrat. Has your vision for the city changed since then?
No, the approach and the kind of core values you bring are always the same, and that's been someone who focuses on solutions, who figures out what do we need to move our city forward, what is the group of people that we bring there, and how do we make it work. I think San Diegans just want a city that works. They want some safe communities, they want an investment in their neighborhoods and some good jobs.
What would your top 3 policy priorities be if you were elected mayor?
Well, I think they're in the things I just outlined. The first thing we've got to do is get serious about investment in our neighborhoods. You know, people are out there and they're seeing streets that are falling apart. Our roads have actually gotten progressively worse over the last 5 years. We're seeing a lot of communities lack investment in sidewalks and parks and libraries. So I think that in conjunction with public safety, we've really seen our police and fire service be decimated. And then the third one would be those good paying jobs. And we laid out a really detailed jobs plan. You can read it on our website at nathanfletcher.com that really outlines how we do that.
It was that plan 130,000 well-paying jobs to San Diego by 2020. Can you give us some highlights of how you would do that?
Well, we want to start by really focusing and reorienting our economy towards the innovative and creative economies, because that is the future. We are an agrarian society and industrial, now we're an innovative. But it's not enough to just have those jobs. We've got to ensure that those working class, middle class jobs, the jobs I came out of a working class family, are available. So we've outlined how we want to invent the idea, how we want to make the product with the new manufacturing zone in Otay Mesa, and then how we want to sell that product to the rest of the world. And that'll really provide those good paying jobs. You can buy a home, put your kids in college, and retire with dignity.
And one of your other priorities you mentioned with neighborhoods. Do you think more money should be spent in the city's urban neighborhoods instead of downtown?
Well, absolutely, absolutely. We've seen a lot of neighborhoods that have really been left behind. And when you live in a neighborhood that doesn't have a street light or a sidewalk, you don't understand how every conversation is about a stadium. Now, I think that's an issue that we can solve and deal with, but I think the first thing and the highest priority of the next mayor has to be to exert the leadership to actually get the investment made in all of our neighborhoods. And when we've done that, then I think there's a lot of other things that we can do.
And speaking of which, the Coastal Commission opposes the convention center expansion plan. Do you support the expansion? We'll start there.
Well, I support the expansion, and I would really like to see them, Maureen. I would like to see them get back to work, because I think the Coastal Commission staff has made some fair recommendations. I think we should all care a great deal about the Coastal Act, about the Coastal Commission, and ensuring folks access to the beaches and the bays, and I think that they can resolve these differences, and I'd like to see them do that.
Do you think, I don't know if you've seen or heard the Chargers' plan for a multi-use stadium complex. Is that something you would support, especially with taxpayer dollars?
Well, we're not going to do anything that puts city general fund dollars on the hook, because city general fund dollars are what people pay to make sure that they have safe communities, they have libraries and parks. Now, I do think that there is a way to tackle this in a broader use with a multi-use facility that gets used 350 days a year. I don't think it makes sense to build a massive box and big piece of infrastructure you use 12 times a year for football or maybe monster trucks. You know, I took my kids to monster truck. But I think we should use a facility that gets used a lot, and that's something we can work on after we've shown the investment in neighborhoods.
Well, former Mayor Filner made a homeless issue a top priority. Do you support year-round funding for the downtown homeless shelter? And if so, how would you get that money?
Well, I support it, and I think that there's a lot of ways to get it. I think that collaboratively we can work with the county and with other governments. This is a regional problem, not just a City of San Diego problem. The federal government has a lot of programs for it. But what I'd like to really see is us focus not just on housing, but actually helping a lot of these folks get back on their feet. You know, a lot of the folks that are homeless have been suffered in the recession, and they just need a little bit of help, and then I think they can take care of themselves.
Okay, we're coming back to the big picture here. You work for Qualcomm now. Right. As a Republican, you supported downtown interests. You had a conservative voting record back then. Democrats have endorsed candidate David Alvarez. How do you convince voters that you're actually a real Democrat?
Well, I disagree with three premises. There's actually three things in there I disagree with. First off, I always had problems with the Republican Party. I was always pro-choice. I supported equal rights, commitment to the environment. I was a liberal or progressive Republican my whole time. The second is, in our last campaign, we talked about all neighborhoods, and we talked about that investment. I highlighted the community of Stockton, which didn't have streetlights, and so we've always cared about that. And third, if you look at the Democrats that have actually known me for years, that worked with me, they are supporting me. Democrats like Congressman Juan Vargas, Congressman Scott Peters, Assemblymember Lorena Gonzalez, Senator Marty Block, Senator Ben Hueso, the Speaker of the Assembly, John Perez, the President Pro Tem, Darrell Steinberg, and so many others, because they know me. And I look forward to working with everyone else. But at the end of the day, Maureen, I think what people want in the next mayor is just someone who's going to get the job done, someone who's going to make our city work. And I don't think folks really care which party they come from, as long as they're willing to move our city forward, and that's what I'll do.
All right, mayoral candidate Nathan Fletcher, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, good to see you again.
Fletcher and other candidates will join us a week from tonight, October 14th, for a KPBS News special, The Mayor's Race, a debate at 5 p.m. on KPBS television. Now, the mental health records of James Holmes have been given to prosecutors in the Colorado theater shootings. The records were presented in a hearing today for the San Diego native accused of killing 12 people in 2012. Holmes pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity to murder and attempted murder charges. The judge plans to see 12 alternate jurors along with the regular jury pool. Mental health or depression may be more common than you think, especially among children and the elderly. The County Health and Human Services Agency is actually urging folks this week to check your mood because most people suffer in silence and don't even know they're depressed.
I was very, very depressed from the medication that I was taking, and I didn't know it, and they showed me.
Jeff Alvarado represents 1 in 4 adults in San Diego County who suffered in silence before getting help to overcome 15 years of depression. He was withdrawn and admits it took 2 years of treatment because he couldn't shake the stigma of having a mental disorder, often ignored in minority communities.
If you feel like you've been in your house a week too long, if you feel like you want to hurt yourself, if you feel anything of those symptoms, then you should seek help.
The county health agency has partnered with nearly 36 community partners this week to provide free screenings at more than 60 locations. They say 1 in 5 children are at risk of depression, and the problem is worse among the elderly. Ruth Covell's specialty is geriatrics.
They become shut away, they quit eating, they react in different ways than the non-elderly, and the suicide rate among the elderly is much, much higher.
19 million people a year are diagnosed with clinical depression. The county health agency wants people to know recovery is possible and help is available. And getting a screening should be as routine as getting your blood pressure checked. And you can find a list of the free screening sites online at sdchip.org. More fixes for the federal website to sign up for health insurance. It's being taken down again early tomorrow morning. The site serves 36 states and got emergency repairs over the weekend after customers complained about problems. Technology experts say the troubles may be high user demand and possible software flaws. Covered California fixed problems with its site last week after launching. People without health insurance can now sign up at various online exchanges, but what about folks who have insurance through their jobs and want to switch providers? Speak City Heights reporter Megan Burks takes a look at the question in tonight's Second Opinion.
This week's question comes from Sylvia Hampton. She's a healthcare advocate with San Diegans for Healthcare Coverage. It's a group of nonprofits, businesses, and hospitals who want to see access to healthcare improve in the region. Her question is actually for a friend who recently switched jobs. His new employer doesn't offer a plan through his preferred provider, Kaiser. It says that really his only option is to leave his Kaiser doctor and find a new one under their plan. Here's Hampton's question.
They are consumers who want to keep their doctor. And the employer is saying, sure, keep your doctor, keep Kaiser, but we're not going to pay for it. So what is the responsibility of the employer to pay that share, or the normal share of the cost that they would pay for another employee who is going on the plan that they have contracted?
So the answer is not the one Hampton's friend was looking for. Under the Affordable Care Act, the responsibility of large businesses starts and stops with offering an affordable plan. The law defines that as falling within 9.5% of an individual's income. The company is not obligated to provide a stipend for him to shop elsewhere, and if he shops for a plan on Covered California, he's not going to qualify for a subsidy. Covered California does not offer subsidies to people who have affordable options elsewhere, and that's regardless of income. To ask your Affordable Care Act question and to use our Obamacare app, go to kpbs.org/secondopinion.
Despite the government shutdown, U.S. Supreme Court justices were back at work today. Peggy Pico has an analysis of the high-profile cases on the court's agenda this session.
The 9 Supreme Court justices opened the new term today, facing dozens of cases from affirmative action and campaign finance to prayer in public office and insurance paying for contraception, just to name a few. Here with details is my guest, law professor Glenn Smith. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Now, Glenn, the court's current conservative majority could change some long-standing laws. What kind of impact would this have if they did change this? Would it set new precedents?
Well, there's several cases where, in addition to deciding the case along the grounds of the way the precedents are, the court's being invited to relook at them and perhaps change them. So, for example, one area is in the campaign finance area. The court's being invited, as part of this case they have on their docket, to basically go back and change the division in current law, which is government can regulate contributions to individual candidates more than it can regulate overall expenditures. They're being asked to maybe wipe that out.
I want to come back to that, but as far as the big picture goes,
right.
So as we progress through these on the case, if the Supreme Court changed their decision
right.
on all of these, how does that trickle down?
Well, it would make it harder to regulate campaign finance.
Okay.
It's already pretty hard, but it would make it a lot harder, especially in the area of religion. You mentioned the case involving prayers at town council meetings. The court is being invited, specifically Justice Alito, the new member whose vote may make the difference, to allow much more mixing of church and state. So that would not change the law there too.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit
Sure.
more. So, town of Greece in New York
exactly.
Opens its legislation with legislative session with a prayer, and so specifically, what is this saying? That no prayer should be there? Prayer should be by certain people, not by others?
The challenge in the case says that even though these were not prayers created by the town, but done by people that were invited to come in, that when you look at the long record, you see that 117 of 121 prayers were from Christians, and very strong Christian prayers. So the two challengers from the town said, and the Second Circuit agreed, that the town associated itself too much with Christianity, and it looked like government was endorsing the Christian religion.
Could this ruling have any relevance to Mount Soledad?
Oh, it definitely could, because the endorsement theory, this theory that government has to go to some lengths not to insinuate itself with religion, is exactly the theory on which the Ninth Circuit invalidated the Mount Soledad case. So if the court sends a message that it's loosening the limits there, it can make a big difference.
Let's talk about the affirmative action case that's on the court docket. Tell us what's at issue there.
What's interesting is it's not about affirmative action directly, but the justices' views of the validity of affirmative action is going to affect it. And bottom line, what it's saying is it constitutional for the citizens of Michigan to have amended their constitution to forbid voluntary affirmative action in education? And the question is, can a majority of voters interfere with what is normally a local educational decision by turning it into a state constitutional matter? So can they put it off limits to local politics and make it a state issue?
So if we took that to the extreme, what kind of impact could that have here in California?
Well, if the court upheld, went along with the very close vote, you could potentially have questions about Proposition 209, which the Ninth Circuit looked at years ago. It's a similar amendment in the California Constitution that forbids voluntary affirmative action, and was upheld by the Ninth Circuit. So it could change the theory there.
Another possible pivotal case is about the Affordable Care Act, guidelines about contraception. So give us a rundown on that.
Court hasn't yet taken a case in this, but most people think it will. Several lower courts have said that it violates the religious free exercise rights of employers and a federal law that prevents religious discrimination to require employers to fund birth control if they don't agree with it on religious grounds. So lower courts have done that. The cases are in the pipeline. Most people think that the court will find this one they need to deal with, and if so, it would be one of the most important decisions of this term.
Are there any other cases that you think we should keep our eye on?
The big case to keep your eye on is a case involving a very dry technical subject, but recess appointments by the president. At a time when the Senate's not in session. And basically the court's going to get a chance to decide whether the president can avoid Senate opposition to his nominees or not. And so that's going to alter the balance not only of President Obama and a Republican Senate, but also future presidents.
All right, the process of power on that one. Law
Absolutely.
Professor Glenn Smith, thanks very much for the update.
My pleasure.
America's new $100 bill is getting a new look with improving printers, and more advanced technology. It's all aimed at fighting against counterfeiters. John Moan of the Associated Press has the story.
The Benjamin is getting a makeover. New security features, new ink, and a new look. Behold the modern $100 bill, the most eye-catching addition, a 3D ribbon.
The 3D security ribbon is actually, I think, a very cool and interesting feature because it actually draws the public's interest to the banknotes so that they can be looking more carefully to protect themselves from any potential counterfeiting.
And a bell symbol within an inkwell that changes color when you tilt the note.
You'll see the bell switching from copper to green, so it gives the illusion as though that bell is disappearing within the inkwell.
There's also raised printing on the face side.
We added a little extra texture to the jacket of Benjamin Franklin so that people could feel that very, very clearly.
The number 100 shifts color when you tilt the bill. On the back side, the number is colored gold. At the Federal Bureau of Engraving and Printing facility in Fort Worth, Texas, the printing presses are churning out stacks of the new cash. The Federal Reserve Associate Director in charge of the currency says the latest redesign is to prevent counterfeiting. And though there were some delays, he adds the new features and colors didn't set back Uncle Sam too many greenbacks.
The Bureau of Engraving and Printing has not had to make any sort of major investments in new equipment to print the new note.
You'll see those new Benjamins in circulation starting on October 8th. John Moan, Associated Press, Fort Worth, Texas.
I'm Judy Woodruff on the next News Hour, a preview of key cases before the Supreme Court this term. That's Monday, the first Monday of October on the PBS News Hour.
One man's trash is another man's treasure, but trash is a major problem along the U.S.-Mexico border region. It draws a flurry of cleanup efforts in the Tijuana River Valley, which begins in Mexico and flows into the Pacific Ocean. From our Fronteras desk, Gio Rablogo reports on work underway to put that trash to better use.
Borderfield State Park occupies some 400 acres in the very southwestern corner of the continental U.S. The entrance to the park isn't exactly inviting. There's an empty dirt lot for parking and a gate that's usually closed. But a project is underway to make the park more welcoming, using trash collected from the adjacent Tijuana River Valley and estuary. Stephen Wright is co-founder of the organization Four Walls International. Four Walls takes trash found in the border region and repurposes it as construction materials.
These are all bottles that we actually sourced these out of the canyon right upstream.
This trash will eventually become a bench for park visitors.
This is a shared binational watershed with about 70% of it in Mexico. And a lot of the socioeconomic issues on the south side of the border have a direct correlation to the environmental issues here on the northern side of the border.
Park Director Chris Peregrine takes me to a stash of plastic bottle building blocks.
If you look at this foam, those little particles, this just splits and breaks and gets smaller and smaller and disperses through the environment and gets embedded in the riparian habitat and the salt marsh, and then ultimately is making its way out to the ocean.
The work here to improve the park entrance is funded by a grant from the San Diego Foundation. And it's not just about building things with trash. It's part of a larger effort to improve the border environment in the U.S. and in Mexico, and to involve the people who stand to benefit from cleaner water and a healthier Tijuana River Valley.
These sorts of cleanups and these smaller level projects are important ways to help the public understand the consequences of our decisions here.
September and October are prime cleanup months in border canyons and river valleys because soon the rains will come, bringing trash, polluted water, and sediment from illegal dumps and construction sites in Tijuana. South of the border, in the Playas de Tijuana neighborhood, dozens of people are cleaning up an abandoned park that stretches along a narrow canyon feeding into the Tijuana estuary across the border. The workers are employed through a temporary work program run by Mexico's equivalent of the Environmental Protection Agency. Here, too, Four Walls International is turning trash into park amenities. The U.S. EPA is supporting the project.
This place is important because first, Tijuana doesn't have many green areas or places to recreate. And second, the idea is to preserve this area to recover the original vegetation.
Downstream from the park, the native willow trees are dense, nearly blocking out sounds from the surrounding neighborhood. Homeless people and deportees used to camp here, but local authorities recently kicked them out so workers could start restoring the natural environment. We walk through the canyon brush until we reach a barrier of rust-colored thick steel bars, the U.S.-Mexico border fence. Jose Palomera Chavez is one of the workers cleaning out the canyon. He's grateful for the job, but seems somewhat skeptical of his neighbor's will to keep areas like this one clean.
The truth is that the people, we don't do our part. I've noticed that several times they've cleaned the canal in my neighborhood, and you should go see it now. It's full of trash, polluted water, and tires. If it's not cleaned up again and it rains hard, all of that trash is going to end up here.
In some ways, this is exactly the point of these binational restoration efforts, to make people like Palomera Chavez aware that how you treat your neighborhood makes a difference not just there, but everywhere downstream. Jill Replogle, KPBS News.
U.S. border residents can do their part for the Tijuana River at a community cleanup border field that happens on October 12th. Now, weather-wise, some cooler temperatures expected this week. In fact, moving into the 60s along the coast with possible showers sometime Wednesday. Similar temperatures in the inland valleys as well. Clouds early in the morning, then sunshine by afternoon right through Thursday. Temperatures dropping into the 50s, believe it or not, in the mountain areas with showers midweek, then sunshine in the desert, but windy with temperatures in the upper 70s. You can find tonight's stories and download the KPBS app all on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Good night.